What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. After watching this video, you're going to be able to achieve much better results when working with 8-bit footage, whether it's from GoPro, drone, DSLR, or in my case, the footage right now, I'm shooting on the C200 and I'm shooting an 8-bit 420. So if you want to learn how I'm still getting such great results, stick around because this video is for you. Now, the first tip I have is actually one that comes before you even turn your camera on, and that is to learn some lighting basics and invest in yourself. Go out and get a few lights. I'm actually lighting this entire scene here with a budget of around $300. I'm using the Godox SL60W as my key light, and then the Aperture MC behind me is a bit of a fill light. Now, the reason I mention this as my first tip is because whenever you're able to light things properly, it can save you a lot of trouble and hassle in post-production because you're not going to have to do as much manipulation to the image. And a lot of times that manipulation is what causes 8-bit footage to break. And if you're not sure what 8-bit, 10-bit, and 12-bit means, basically it's a way of describing how many colors a camera can record. And for more information, I'm going to send you to this video here, as I think it's going to clarify a few things that may make this video make a little more sense. So one of the main problems with 8-bit footage is that if you get really heavy with the grade, the image can start to fall apart or break, especially if you're trying to pull keys, because some colors that should be reading as different colors are actually read as the same color. They're combined as one because of the camera's lack of ability to distinguish the difference between those two colors. Like I said, that can make it difficult to pull keys, and that's actually a perfect segue into our first tip in Davinci Resolve, which is to stop pulling keys when working with 8-bit footage. But if you must, let's look at how to do it the right way. All right, so my first don't in Davinci Resolve when working with 8-bit footage is don't use the eyedropper tool to pull your qualifications or pull your key. So let's look at what I mean by that. In Resolve, let's go ahead and hop into the qualifier tab, and we're going to select our eyedropper tool, and then let's go ahead and find a hero frame, something like this right here, and then we'll drag this eyedropper tool over the forehead. Now let's highlight it to see what we've qualified. And this is going to lead to a lot of problems. Yes, it's doing a good job of grabbing her skin, but look at how blotchy it is. It's going to lead to a lot of issues later on down the road, especially if you're going to be stacking a lot of grading on top of this. So what is the right way to do this? So for example's sake, I'm going to go ahead and make some changes here. I'm going to push my gamma a little more towards skin tone, and then same with the gain, same with the lift, just to kind of exaggerate. And if we uncheck this highlight, it's looking pretty terrible, honestly. So if we zoom in, we can see all this blotchiness in the sky, just a lot of artifacts. It just looks absolutely terrible. And if we disable it, let's go ahead and go over the right way to do this. Let's hop into our 6 vector. Some of you can already see where this is going. We're going to go into color, presets, and then 6 vector red. Let's see what our qualification looks like now. Already much cleaner. Yes, we're qualifying some other objects. We have a little bit of the background in that qualification as well, but that's not a problem. If you're making these changes on a clean key, it's not going to reveal a lot of issues. And to demonstrate, let's go ahead and take our width here. We're going to clean this key up just a little bit more and include a little bit more skin. And now we are kind of bleeding into the sky. That's okay. Let's go ahead and denoise it to get rid of some of that blotchiness there. And now we don't have any of those weird squares. And then we can take our blur radius as well. And now if we do those same changes, we're just going to bring our gamma towards red, lift towards red, gain towards red. Could have just used offset, but now if we uncheck that highlight, look at that. We do not see any of those artifacts. We don't see any around her face. We're not seeing it bleed into extra areas of the frame we don't want it to. Even if we go over to this area of the qualification, I mean, everything looks good. It's all holding up. And now you may be saying, well, I denoise this one and I increase the blur radius. Okay, well, let's go ahead and disable this one. Let's hop into the eyedropper one, re-enable it, and let's go ahead and take that denoising. I think the last one was like 7.8. Blur radius, we'll crank it up to 20. You tell me which one looks better, because 10 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you that the 6 vector is giving me a cleaner result, especially if you just look at the sky. That looks much better. So don't use the eyedropper tool to pull qualifications, especially if you're doing it for skin. And on that note, let's go ahead and look at another way to correct skin tones without pulling a key at all. Now here's the instance where I do recommend using the eyedropper. We're going to go to hue versus hue. So we're going to take this eyedropper, hover over her forehead here, as that's usually the best indication for skin tones. And we're going to make a point. And now if we wanted to adjust her skin tones, this is going to be the way we're doing that. It's going to be much cleaner. We're not having any qualifications. There's not going to be any artifacting from this. And another way to make it even cleaner is to take the outside points here, make sure that their hue is at 0, unless you wanted to change them. And then we're just going to change that input hue. We're going to make this selection a little bit wider. So we're pulling this point further to the right, and then the first point, we're going to pull that one further to the left. You can see I moved it, so we're just going to click hue rotate, hit 0, and now we're good. Now for this image, her skin's already looking good as is. So if I wanted to change it a little bit, I could, but for the most part, it's fine. Her skin looks great. And then you can take the same practice and hop into your hue versus sat, do the same thing, leave a point there, and we can bring up the saturation in her skin. And I think that looks all right. Not too bad. So if you really wanted to get specific with it, you could pair the last method using that 6-vector qualification with this hue versus hue curve and the hue versus sat curve. And you can put those both in one, and then you're really dialing in where your qualifications are made and what changes you're making to the overall image. So the next thing I have for you when working with 8-bit footage is don't bring your footage directly from your camera into your editor, whether it's Resolve, Premiere, whatever it is. Usually the cameras shooting in 8-bit are not recording those files in a very edit-friendly codec. Do consider transcoding your footage into something like ProRes 422, which gives you great performance enhancements without taking up an unfathomable amount of space like ProRes 444XQ. And if you do go this route, be sure to have a pretty fast external hard drive. I recommend a solid state, something like the T7, which has a read and write speed of over 1,000 megabytes a second. And this won't improve the quality of your footage, but you will notice some serious improvements on your computer's ability to edit and grade these clips because it has less work to do. It's not having to decompress the footage and then make a cut and then play it back. It has a lot less work to do because the footage is less compressed. So contrary to popular belief, bigger file sizes does not necessarily mean that your computer is going to have a harder time playing back those files and editing them. So the next step is don't just jump into it and then make a whole bunch of nodes and start making a whole bunch of changes with no strategy. You need to have a structure and a method. And of course, this applies to all footage, not just 8-bit, but since 8-bit is less forgiving, it's a little more applicable here. So I'm going to reset this and I'm going to show you one of my more basic node trees, and this is one that I'll use on any clips. So I'm just going to go over into my power grades and I'm going to add on this base grade V3 that I made a while ago. And now, because this is in my power grades and not my stills, on any project I can just go click that and then bam, it's going to automatically apply all those nodes as I have them saved, and I can go in and start making changes from there. Order does matter. There's a reason I have certain things separated, and since I first created this tree, I've actually got a lot more nodes now because I prefer to isolate things into different nodes such as like white balance, saturation, and exposure, because then if I'm moving on to clip, I can go back and exactly see where my problem source is, and I can hop into just that node and make those changes right there. So yes, a lot of these tips I've mentioned can be applied to working with 10 and 12-bit footage, but any problems they introduce there are only going to be amplified when it's 8-bit. And that leads me to my last point, which is do not get frustrated if your footage begins to break when you're grading it. It's going to happen. You just have to figure out where the problem causers are and then find ways around them. And hopefully this video will prevent you from encountering those too much. But as you get better and better and you go through this process over and over again, you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't. Think of 8-bit footage as kind of like a rite of passage to the higher quality stuff. Because even right now, I'm still working with a lot of 8-bit footage. Not everything that lands in my lap is Ari Alexa shot on red. 8-bit footage really isn't going away anytime soon. So you have to know how to work with it, and it's only going to help you get to the next level faster. So that's all from me. Thanks so much for watching. I love seeing this community grow. So please reach out, say hello. Let's keep getting better together. Love you guys. Peace.